I just want to share with you, I'd like to go back to the point about ruthlessness. I want to share an experience that I've had, not the one in Parliament. That's because I may start tearing if I talk about that. No, this was in the 1980s, when I was the producer of the National Day Rally speech, and he was Prime Minister at Kallang Theatre. This was the rehearsal the night before the National Day Rally speech. So Mrs. Lee and he, PM Lee, would come at about 9:30 for a run-through, and they would stay till past midnight. And he had called, he had summoned me, instructed me to make sure that there is an engineer from PUB there present, because he wants the temperature on stage to be a particular specific temperature. I can't remember what it was, 24 degrees. I mean, I remember writing it down, and then wondering whether I wrote it down correctly, So of course, I arranged for a PUB engineer. So there was this young engineer who came from PUB, looked like a fresh grad. Mind you, the whole auditorium is empty, right? Except for Mrs. Lee sitting in the front row. Mr. Lee was on stage, okay, and he walked to the lectern, and within seconds, he huffed and puffed and he said, "This place is freezing. Where is the engineer?" And the poor chap was standing right behind. And he quickly came to the front and he said, "What's the temperature?" And the guy went to the side of the stage and checked the thermometer and said, the correct temperature, 24 degrees or something. And then Mr. Lee glared at him and said, "What's the distance between that thermometer and where I'm standing?" And the engineer said, it's probably about 25 meters, 20 meters. He said, "Can the temperature vary in 25 meters? And then the gentleman, the poor guy, by this time his voice was getting more and more shrill, and he was saying, "Yes, but it depends on how many bodies there are in the auditorium." And he said, no, my question is, can the temperature vary in 25 meters? And he said, "Yes." "Then why didn't you put the thermometer where I'm standing? Isn't that the smart thing to do?" And he said, "You're dumb." And that's when I felt upset, He said, "You're dumb." And he said, "Which university did you go to?" Of course, it was NUS. And
it wasn't Cambridge.
It wasn't Cambridge. Maybe it was Cambridge. He and said NUS. But it was for me a very clear indication of it was ruthless, but he was exacting, and his argument was logical, right? In other words, if I am asking for the temperature to be this, you should then put the thermometer where I am, not where the temperature can vary. There's a logic to the argument.
Which is correct.
Which is
the
correct.
Spotlight will make it different.
But the problem is, the question I asked at that point was, did it have to be that harsh? Right? And what was interesting was, he was worked up. Mrs. Lee just called up to him and said, "Harry," and then he calmed down. So to a large extent, I think Mrs. Lee was a very powerful thermostat, was able to control the temp, but he was mercurial to a large extent. Now, I'm not passing judgment, I'm not saying but I think he got used to that, because he needed to be tough and hard and demonstrate that this is no nonsense. If you don't get it done, you're out. The one mistake society thing. So that's, I think, what Mr. Dana referred to as a certain ruthlessness, and he's used to that because that's how Singapore was built.